What's going down, DGens? I'm back again, spouting off more math nuggets about the NFL. Today I have a big nugget, like huge, like constipated after PF Chang's size of nugget, and I really want to share that with you guys. And we will definitely be basing picks, probably several picks, off of this nugget this year. Also, though, want to talk about some rematch data, why we should focus on some rematches and games and things like that, and make some of these rematch games are bigger plays or maybe like a 5% play or whatever you want to call it throughout the season. I'm going to also talk about some of the key numbers and the key weeks of the NFL per the last few years worth of information or data. A lot of key numbers, pretty much everybody knows that as far as like your big, YouTube people on gambling, and probably a lot of yourselves know that as well, especially for NFL. It's not that hard. But key weeks is something I have never heard anybody else talk about, and I've been keeping track of data for roughly 4 to 5 years now, that I have on hand, and we're going to go over that. Also, though, we're going to wrap everything up with some correlation talk. So if you don't know about correlations, or if you've never heard about it, if you haven't watched a previous video on correlations, you're in for a sweet, sweet surprise, which is basically just like a math class. But don't worry, it won't be too boring, and you will get some gambling information out of it. So you'll get your fix, right? So anyways, oh, sorry. Lastly, I want to manage to throw in another nugget based on the last few years worth of preseason information, because those bets are going to be coming up sooner than you think. You roughly have about 50 days until the Hall of Fame game. So it's coming up pretty quickly. I think a lot faster than most of us think, as it seems like a long time. We're in mid-June. It is about 50 days away, guys. So it's not too far around. I know, I'm getting the shakes too. But don't worry, it'll be here sooner than later. I am a damn degenerate, so I am going to be looking at the Hall of Fame game. I'm going to be watching preseason. I'm going to be betting on it and gambling on it and just getting drunk with it and doing everything I can with the damn preseason, because I am that damn thirsty for football right now. But anyways, let's get into it. Grab a beer, grab a notebook, a recorder. Just open the sports book right now, actually. If you got some money in there, let's just start firing off some bets as I'm talking. Just do it. You won't regret it. Just go ahead and do it right now. So let's touch on some rematch information like I was saying earlier. The big nugget I have for you guys, and I've gone back through about 5 years worth of NFL data. I scrubbed the numbers, I washed them, I turned them around, I gave them a spit shine, I rubbed them, gave them the whole reach around, and then I triple checked those numbers, and I did find a play that hits at a 90% hit rate. 90%. To those of you that are out there that maybe don't or have not been playing sports gambling, NFL gambling, whatever, 90% is like unheard of. Now there is some variance, so let's say that there's a good year and a bad year, whatever it is. But the very, very worst year of all of this was at about 81% hit rate. This is amazing. Like I said, this is something that I am going to definitely be playing. I'm going to definitely be taking advantage of, making big plays on this particular angle. And it's probably going to be one of the very few times you guys hear me say I'm going above the 1 to 2 unit mark. Usually I stick to just 1 unit. A lot of times I even do just a half unit. When these plays come up, guys, it's going to be big. This is going to be one of those throw your money down, put them on the table, pull it out, let's measure it, let's all that other shit about this when these plays come up. I'm going to be sharing those plays with you. I'm going to give you the information. I'm going to tell you when they come up. I'm going to tell you, look, this is a big play. This is one of those get your damn money down, get the mortgage down kind of plays. That being said, the bad news is, and I promise, this isn't just clickbait, some bullshit I'm pulling out of my ass, whatever you want to think it is, it's not. But I cannot disclose the exact details of this angle, because while the channel's small, we got like 200 plus followers or whatever. Thank you for that, by the way. It's a lot bigger than it used to be. It only takes 1 or 2 people to start talking about this, or to mention it in a chat room, or to give it, put it as a comment on like another YouTube channel, and let somebody else, a bigger whale better, somebody who can get down hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, or even just, several thousands of dollars on this, and maybe let it get kind of leak out there, get it into the system, and poof, like there goes the advantage. There goes my opportunity, your opportunity, all of our opportunities to make some serious money with this play this year. Just off the top of my head, I can almost guarantee you we're gonna have roughly 16 to 20 games that are going to land in this criteria. Um, like I said, roughly 16 to 20. Last year we had about 24. I'm expecting a little bit less this year, but about, let's just take it to absolute minimum and say 16 opportunities to play this particular angle. We'll leave it at that. What I can tell you as far as like details on this, and I'm going to try to not get too specific, but it does involve rematches, and today's video is going to be primarily focused on rematches because I've done a lot of research on rematches, looking into what we can do, how we can take advantage of them. They've been very profitable in the years past, and they're one of the few instances where we have kind of an idea of what these teams look like when they are playing against each other for the second time around. Now, that being said, these rematches this year in 2023 start in week 8 is when you'll have the game 2 of a lot of these divisional opponents. I can also tell you, like I said, it is not all rematches. It's not going to be every single rematch that we can take this big edge. It's just not the way that the angle is found. It's going to be a very unique subset of rematches. Roughly over the course of the season, you're going to have about 48 games that are rematches, right? So it's 3 per team. Or I'm sorry, 96, but 48 because there's the teams involved. So roughly, let's just call it 96 the way I have it listed out. Of that, like I said, you're going to have about 16, so it's not a very big percentage of those rematches that are going to fall into this category. Now, like I said, we are going to be taking big swings when they come up. Now, due to the hit rate, because like I said, we're averaging about a 90% hit rate with this one, we can take the odds all the way down to negative 300. So if for whatever reason this particular angle is like a really short odd, right, meaning it's negative something, this here in front of you, if you're looking at the screen, I did provide a break-even win percentage chart. You may want to take a picture of this, screenshot it, whatever, because I can guarantee this is going to be helpful at some point in your gambling career. But the reason that most people tell you not to bet past like negative 130 is because it's hard to win enough to make that profitable. If you're betting negative 130s all the time, you have to win 56.52% of the time, and you can't really win 0.52% of the time. So let's just round it and say you have to win 57% of the time to see even the slightest amount of profit. So that's pretty damn hard to do. If you don't know, 60% is really good. 60% is well above average, and 60% is enough of a winning average to make a living off of, basically. If you see guys like Warren Sharp or Scott Fezzik or whoever the hell else you're looking at for professional bettors, 60% is like their bread and butter. Like if you can hit 60, you're good. So if this is your first year getting involved in this, thinking about this, please do not go in with the wrong interpretation. Yes, you may think like, hey, every year I pick the right team and I know who's going to win on Thanksgiving or whatever the hell else you're doing. I guarantee you it is not that easy. Then you're most likely going to lose the first 3 years that you're playing in this arena. The best advice I can give you is just to listen to those people that have come before you, take as many notes as you can, keep an open mind, and do your own homework, do your math homework specifically. A lot of these things come down to numbers and very small edges and margins, and that's how you get ahead with gambling. Now, that being said, if you'll notice, like I said, we can take it all the way down to negative 300. Now, at 300, that's only a 75% hit rate. Like I said, we are going to expect to hit at above 81%. 90%, like I said, is the average, but over 81%. The reason I don't want to go over negative 300 is a couple of reasons. Number one, there could be variance, right? Just because it's never gone below 81 before, or at least in the last couple of years I've been checking it, doesn't mean that it won't. Number two, for bankroll reasons, we really don't want to be extending yourself, much past that negative 300. We really don't even want to do the negative 300 unless we absolutely have to. And my hope and my expectation is that we won't have to do the 300, more than once this year. But I'm putting it out there right now because you may say like, wow, that's a lot. I'm not touching that. That's minus 250 or whatever. I don't want to do that. I understand because I typically don't do that either. But for this particular system play, just know, and I'm telling you right now, months ahead of time, I may be going to a negative 300 for some of these system plays, and that will kind of tip you off too to let you know why I'm doing it and that it is a system play. Lastly, like I said, between variance, bankroll management, and then secondly is just it may be your first foray into it. It may be my first entry into it, depending on when we get this chance, when this particular advantage is going to come up, and I don't want to start that off, putting myself in a big hole. I don't want to put in $3,000 and then have that lost, right, because of just one shitty variance. So, like I said, negative 300 is going to be my absolute maximum with that, but just know that that is a possibility. I should say a few other notes I can give you on the angle. And let me just put this out there. I do fully expect that at some point throughout this season, there will be those of you who are going to pick up on what I'm playing and hopefully run with it yourself and, just kind of understand what we're aiming for, what we're doing, what we're taking advantage of. But if and when we get to that point, and again, this is a relatively small channel, right? It's only like 200 some people. Maybe we get to 300, maybe we get to 500, and hopefully, it gets beyond that at some point. But whoever is out there that picks up on this, please be discreet with the information because it will be your angle at that point. You would be very smart to not ruin your own advantage by giving it out there, letting everybody know, putting on chat boards, all that kind of stuff. Because like I said, you may think your reach doesn't go very far, but I can guarantee you it's going to reach further than you think, and you just don't want to ruin this advantage. This is an advantage that I can tell you has taken hours, if not days, of research, back data, correlations, math, models, numbers, spreadsheets, all that stuff. Please, when you find out what it is, if you find out what it is, don't ruin it. Let's milk this thing for as much as we can, and change your life if you can. Also, I will be looking to possibly parlay some of these picks. So especially if it is like a lower odd, right? So if it is like a minus 200 that we have to play at some point on this angle, we may want to look to parlay that, especially because we have some other data points with rematches that we kind of have a better idea on, who's going to win, over, under, spreads, all that kind of stuff, where we can kind of find more plus EV situations, right? So if we do get one of these angles and it's at a minus 200, if we can parlay that with a spread or angle or whatever, and we can get that to like an even money, even better. And then you don't have to lay that negative 300. And especially, excuse me, when looking at that, I'm specifically referring to same game parlays, right? So there's only certain situations in which I would ever advise somebody parlaying, and it's typically going to be same game parlays, and it's usually where one thing correlates to the other, right? So if you've been listening to the channel already for a while, you already know this, but basically if we think that a team is going to win and they are a low scoring defensive team, then we're probably going to parlay the win or the points or whatever it is on the spread to the under, and vice versa. If we think that the high scoring offensive team is going to win, then we may do the over with that team. If we think it's going to be a weather game, right, then we may do the defensive team with the under, something like that. So you're trying to correlate these games together to where it's not just like a generic random square ass parlay where like, well, yeah, the Cowboys are going to win, and I also think, the damn Raiders are going to win, when they're not there's nothing correlating the two together. They're just random picks. It's just that's just not a smart way to do it. Just real quick, and I was completely varying from what the hell I wanted to say. But let's just say that you're a 60% picker, right? Like you can pick games at a 60% rate. This is why you don't parlay, and I just want to put this out there just so everybody knows. So if you have a 60% chance of winning game 1 and a 60% chance winning game 2, great individually. If you parlay those together, you have to literally multiply these odds, which means you have a 36% chance of winning that game. And that's if you are a 60% picker, which honestly, you're probably not. Hell, I'm not. And secondly, that's if you're getting decent enough odds, right? Because a lot of times when you parlay something, they're not going to give you true odds. So that's why we don't typically parlay unless it's something that is correlated, so that we can kind of increase those chances and make the numbers work in our advantage. So anyways, like I was saying, this angle that I keep talking about and I'm being real vague about, again, took lots of work. So I'm not going to be leaving it anytime soon. Like I said, I will be coming back to it throughout the season. I'll tip you guys off, let you know when these plays are coming up. Like I said, it's not going to be every week. Hell, I can tell you the earliest won't be until game 8 or to week 8. And even at that, it may not happen at week 8. It may not be later to the season. And it's, again, going to only be a very few handful of games. There's 272 games in the season. We're looking at maybe 16 of them, maybe, or hopefully, that we're going to actually be putting money on. So let's get into the rest of the rematch details that I can give you, and this is not regarding the angle, just separate rematch information that I found out this week that I want to share with you guys. So number one for me, the bigger one, is that 65.63% of game ones between divisional rivals will stay under a total of 44. 65% of games, the first time these teams match up, are going to stay under 44. There's a couple of reasons behind that, but one, a lot of times, the teams aren't trying to show each other what they have because they know they're going to play again. So they're going to kind of keep it a little vanilla. They're going to do what they got to do to stay close, to win the game, whatever, but they're going to keep it relatively simple and not show all their cards. Number two, a lot of these games happen very early in the season, and you'll notice that just looking at the schedule, week 1, week 2, week 3, you see a lot of divisional games, right? And like hell, even the Sunday night opener is Cowboys-Giants. So, right there, it's a divisional game, and like I said, most of the games week 1 are going to be divisional games. But when we pair that up, right, that 65% of game ones are going to stay under 44 with an early season game, we have an even better chance that these scores are going to stay low and specifically under 44. If you're wondering why I'm coming back to this 44 number, it's because 44 is a key number. The key numbers for totals, 41, 44, 47, and 51. 51 being the key number for a high total, 41 number being the key number for a low total, 44 and 47 obviously being kind of in the middle. But 44 and 47 are your more typical scores. 43 is also a semi-key number. It doesn't come up as much as 44 and 47, and it also does not get put out on lines as often as 44 and 47. But 43 is a key number, so if you can get it, obviously great. And if you can pass through it with a teaser, which I know most people don't want to tease totals, there's certain reasons for that. I'll save my answer for that for later. But in these early few seasons, when we know that the games have a better chance of staying under 44, just again off of divisional matchups, we also pair that up with the fact that the scoring in the NFL, like your average scoring, does not increase, and we don't see a spike until week 4. So the preseason through week 1, 2, and 3, we see a relatively low, kind of gradual growth. It stays relatively even. It's around like 41 to 43 on just a regular average week. Week 4, we see a spike. And this is not just like a one-off occasion. This wasn't just last year. There's going to be a couple years worth of data on this point. We'll get back to that in just a minute when I go over those. But The last thing here, as far as rematches are concerned, last year, so 2022, there were 14 games that stayed under a total of 44. And then in game 2 of that divisional matchup, they again stayed under 44. So there were much more than 14 that stayed under 44. There's actually roughly about 60 of these game ones, or 60 games that stayed under 44. But 14 of them not only stayed under 44 the first time, they stayed under 44 again the second time. However, 14, that's again total number, of those 14 that stayed under 44 both times, 10 of them in the rematch game involved either an injured quarterback or a team that had a consistently rotating quarterback, right? So like Lamar Jackson, when they played towards the end of their season and they played, the Browns and the Steelers, they played without Lamar Jackson. If you're looking at your screen right now, you can see this here. The rematch with Cleveland, they scored 16 points and they had scored 43 in the first game. With Pittsburgh, they had scored 30 in the first game and then 29 in the second game. Again, both of those rematches came without Lamar Jackson. Secondly, though, the other teams that were involved with these like lower scoring rematch games were teams like Washington, where you just had like a rotating door of quarterbacks. You never really had one true, quarterback back there. It was an issue. We also, actually, just looking through the screen here, we had another team like the Steelers. So you had Kenny Pickett, rookie. It's just kind of, like I said, either bad quarterbacks, injured quarterbacks, rotating quarterbacks, not really having a true starter. Easy enough to pick out once you know the information ahead of time. So if we know that now, once we get to that point of the season where we're looking at rematches, and we're kind of honing in on these lower scoring game ones, we know that game 2 should be an increase in score, but secondly should be an increase in score, barring this quarterback issue, right? Like if there's a quarterback issue lingering, you might as well just not even touch it to stay off of it, because it's kind of a 50-50 shot at that point. So that's it for rematches. Like I said, that's going to be the big chunk of the information here. There is other stuff obviously I want to go over, but a lot of this is going to be a little bit less analytical. So the first thing I want to go over is what I like to call my Fade 5. The Fade 5 is basically the 5 teams that I do not want to touch this year. The teams that I want to fade every chance possible. Now I did kind of cheat here by throwing in some honorable mentions, but I'm going to cover them pretty quickly. There's about 3 or 4 of them, and then I'll give you the 5 teams that I really want to bet against, specifically early in the season before the market adjusts, because I can tell you early in the season bad teams are going to not get enough points, basically, because the Vegas or the lines or the books or whatever have not adequately rated these guys, and they may think and know that these teams are bad, but they don't know how bad. So in the beginning of the season, they may be giving them +7, but by week 8, 9, 10, they're consistently seeing like a +14, +13, and it's a huge difference. So we want to jump on them early before those adjustments come. So first honorable mention here is the Vikings. Just a quick little rundown on them. Coaching is solid. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is awesome. He's probably one of the best receivers in the game right now. They do have Osborne. They added Addison. So good receiving core there. Hawkinson is a tight end, guys. I personally think that Madison play is going to at least somewhat come back to bite them in the ass. Dalvin Cook is good. I don't think he's like prime Dalvin Cook anymore, but he's a really good above average running back, and you're going to be going down to at least an average running back, if not less than that. I think that is going to at least somewhat kind of show some depleted return, but that's not really why I'm looking to fade the Vikings. The bigger reason I'm looking to fade the Vikings is their 1-game win percentage. Having a 1-score game is really suboptimal, meaning like the more you do it, the bigger the risk it is, and the more it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. Most teams go about 500, so if they have like 10 games, 12 games that are decided by 1 score or less, you're going to win about half of those. The Vikings went 13-0 last year in one-score games. You've probably heard this before, and I probably sound like a nerd saying it, just like everybody else that says it, but it's really unsustainable to keep doing that. It's just at some point the ball bounces the other way. You don't get the right call, you don't get the flag, you whatever, and it doesn't go your way. So that's number one. We're really set up for some regression with the Vikings. But number two, the biggest issue I saw with the Vikings last year was not their offense. Their offense was fine. It puts up a lot of points. That's probably why they won so many games. It was their defense, and specifically their defensive line and their run stopping ability. Anytime they played a team that could run and was going to be physical with them, they got their ass handed to them, and fucking mightily. So if you go back and watch them play against like the Eagles, that was relatively early in the season, or you watch them play against the Cowboys, which is a little bit later in the season, obviously. Both of those teams, who were run-heavy teams, good offensive lines, just pushed them around, did whatever the hell they wanted to do, had huge running gaps, and just beat the dog shit out of the Vikings, where it wasn't even like a contest by the second half. So that's my two biggest issues with them. The personnel I think is fine. The coaching I think is fine. Offensively, I just think it's the defense, and then again, the sustainability of playing these really tight games. It's going to come back to bite them in the butt. But again, the good is kind of equal with the bad at that point, and I don't really want to fade them, especially the entire season. I think it's maybe a game here or there against good running teams where we can kind of look to go against the Vikings. The Saints are the next one. The Saints coaching staff is fucking terrible. Dennis Allen is just nothing short of an idiot as far as like football is concerned. Maybe he's a great guy. He's not good when it comes to football. I'm surprised he has this chance again. They also added Derek Carr, which Derek Carr is like an average quarterback, right? I think if anybody had to rate him, regardless of what week you're looking at, he's somewhere between like 14 and 18, 14 and 20 on like a top 32 quarterbacks, right? Like every week he's just an okay dude. But Dennis Allen coaching Derek Carr is not a recipe for success. In my opinion, you're going to have a quarterback who's average taking notes from a coach who's subpar. On top of that, you have guys like Alvin Kamara, who should be like a game changer, that is probably going to start the season with a suspension. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, the receiving room could be good. Olave almost positively will be good. Michael Thomas, who the hell knows? He fucking doesn't even know. Every position group on the Saints is like okay at best. Even the receiving core, like Olave, like I said, he's probably above average, but I don't think he's special enough to get them, over the hump. He's still just a second-year player. He's catching passes from Derek Carr, who's, again, okay. The coaching isn't going to get them there. I just don't really see a good angle for them. The only thing that helps them, and the only reason I'm not super high on fading their ass, is because they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. So they may get some wins, some little shitty wins here and there, just based off of the easy schedule that they have. And they also have a couple of rest advantage games down the stretch that I think are going to help them out. So I'm not looking to completely fade them, and that's how they stayed off the fade 5. Next is the Packers. Packers with Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love combination. LaFleur's been good. He's proven himself like a decent enough coach, but he's consistently starting slow, and we went over this in one of the last videos, but his first 2 games out of the gate every season since he's been a coach have been very, very slow, very low scoring, just suboptimal. It seems like he's just still like looking for data. He's still trying to find good ways to like attack his opponent, and doesn't really go well. And that's to say that he had Aaron Rodgers before, and before that he even had Devontae Adams, and now he's not really working with much. So who knows? Maybe Jordan Love is better than we're expecting. Maybe the receiving core is gonna come to life, right? Maybe Christian Watson's gonna do something that we're not thinking. But it's a tall task with a coach that we're not expecting to come out hot. A coach that we're thinking is just, he's okay. Maybe he's even like an above average coach, but you're giving this guy subpar talent. And in the NFL, most teams have relatively equal talent, right? Like everybody's got good players. But the fact that his quarterback is just, bottom 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the league right now. If we had to just guess, right, and put an estimation on it, he's bottom 5, bottom 10 if you want to be generous. And he doesn't really have a receiving core. There's just not really a lot of direction with that team. There's not really a lot of offensive weapons out there. There's not really a whole lot of anything now that Rodgers is gone. It's going to be a tall task for him, and I don't see a good way to get him up there. The only reason that they are not on the Fade 5 is because I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach. I think he will find them some wins. They'll probably get some wins they're not supposed to. They'll probably find some alterations throughout the season. He's smart enough to attack the opponent at their weak spot, and he'll get some wins that way. But it's going to be in spite of the team around him, not because of the personnel. Last one here, as far as like the honorable mention, is Washington. Washington's another team I'm really low on this year. Ron Rivera is just not a very good coach. He's been a subpar coach pretty much every year in the NFL. I'm surprised he's honestly still even a coach at this point. Sam Howell last year was okay. He showed some flashes in like individual games and individual quarters, but I've never seen the guy put it together for a full game. He's definitely not like in that elite tier quarterback. And to me, anytime you are asking an average to subpar coach to take an average to subpar quarterback and make the team good, you're just basically asking for the impossible, right? You're taking two like subpar things and saying, okay, be great, and that's not going to happen, especially in the division that they're in, where you have the Eagles. I personally don't think the Cowboys are going to be good either. I think Mike McCarthy is going to get exposed this year. I thought that last year too, but I will tell you right now, I think Kellen Moore was hiding a lot of the flaws, and now that McCarthy has his hands more on the handles, you're going to see the guy get even worse. You're going to see everything being less optimal. You're going to see shorter passes, more runs. He's already come out saying he wants to run it. Anyways, getting off the topic here. So Washington, though, again, not a good coach, not a good quarterback. They don't really have a great running back. They have good receivers, but they don't really have a quarterback that can, one, get them the ball consistently where they need it, and two, has not really proven his ability to read an NFL defense just yet. So he's going to have some mistakes. They're going to make some issues, and hopefully it's not like the worst possible time. The only reason that they are not on the top 5, and this one is kind of a reach, even for me, is because Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator. He is basically the head coach in waiting. He came there from the Chiefs. The guy's amazing. We all have seen what he's done with the Chiefs. He's expected to do that with Washington too. Now, I don't think he's going to do that this season, but there's a few possibilities. So number one, Ron Rivera understands what's going on. He kind of takes his hands off the reins and gives it to Bieniemy and just kind of is a figurehead. Or two, at some point in the season, especially if Ron is maybe a little too hands-on and the team is not doing well, he gets fired, he gets let go. Bieniemy has to kind of come in and step in, and he becomes the interim coach, right, or head coach or whatever. Those are possibilities. And so for that reason, because I trust Bieniemy so much and because he's shown us so much over the years, they just stayed off the Fade 5. So who are the 5 teams that I'm fading? Number 1, the Buccaneers. Again, Todd Bowles. Now, Todd Bowles, to me, is a bottom 5 coach. Terrible coach. Very defensive-minded. Plays like it's fucking 1980 still. And now you're going to give him Baker Mayfield. Now, they barely had a winning season last year. And that was won by the fucking grace of God, the prayers of Tampa Bay, and Tom Brady, right? Now you're going to give them Baker Mayfield with an aging receiving core. Mike Evans is, I don't want to say clearly, but it looks like he's lost a step. Chris Godwin should be still good. They don't really have a whole lot else behind those two. And now again, you're asking Baker or Kyle Trask or whoever the hell to step in and take the reins from Tom Brady. Again, this is another situation where we have a subpar coach, very subpar coach, with an average at best, like on his best day, average Baker Mayfield. You're asking them to win games, and I don't see it. Maybe in their division, maybe because they are playing other bad coaches and other bad teams, specifically the Saints. Now, I think Frank Reich is probably the best coach in that division with the Panthers, but again, that's another team. You have a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, so maybe they get some wins, but it's just a bad combination, and it's a team that I think is people know, and they've been kind of vocal about the potential downfall of the Buccaneers and how they're like half in, half out on the season already. But I do think you're going to see a little bit of value on this team early in the season before everybody fully commits to them being shitty, because you still have some people that are holding out hope, that are thinking maybe they'll have kind of a graceful downfall and just have like a good pick next year. I think, and that, in my opinion, is going to be completely wiped out by week like 4. But for the first couple weeks here, we can look to maybe fade the Bucks. Secondly is the Raiders. I've gone over this with you guys before. Raiders are my absolute number 1 fade this year, or they're on this fade 5 list, right? But terrible head coach. Josh McDaniels has not done a damn good thing in the NFL. Quarterback wise, who knows, right? It should be Jimmy G. The most likely outcome is that Jimmy G is the quarterback for this team. But even if he is, Jimmy G is not a downfield passer for the most part, right? He's kind of a game manager. He wants to take the checks downs, take the safe passes, just kind of take what the defense is giving him. He's not really going to push the ball here. And you have a team that is really not, just not offensively powered other than Devontae Adams. You do have Josh Jacobs, but Devontae Adams, as of right now, seems like he's trying to get off the team. So a guy who's not really sold on being there with Josh Jacobs, who is a good to above average, I think he's an above average running back, but that's not really going to get them a lot of wins in the NFL this year, especially when you have a coach who's going to be doing a lot of suboptimal things, putting his team behind the 8 ball, and then asking Josh Jacobs to go run you out of it. It's just not going to happen very often. Don't get me wrong, they will get wins. It's an NFL team, especially if Jimmy G is there, especially if Devontae Adams is there. They will get some stats. They will get some of their numbers. They'll get a couple of wins, I'm sure. But it's just not a team that I have a lot of faith in. And any time that it's going to be close or a pick 'em or anything like that, or even just like it seems like they're getting some respect against a team who is actually good, I am looking to fade this team at every possible scenario. So Raiders definitely on the top, fade 5. Cardinals, Colts, and Texans are going to round it out as the other 5 teams. The Cardinals, pretty straightforward. We all know that they're going to be shit. I think they even know that, to be quite frank. You have first-time head coach in Jonathan Gannon. Now, at least he is an offensive coach, which is good. It's something to maybe build around. Colt McCoy is the quarterback who, again, let's just call him average, I guess, to be nice about it. The problem with the Cardinals, and the reason that I'm not super high and happy about fading these guys, is because everybody knows that this team is going to be bad. There's not going to really be a lot of value. The Cardinals are coming into this season being, basically treated as like the scrub of the league. They're not getting any respect. I don't think they're going to get any respect. I do think this is going to be just a shitty year for them. It happens. From a gambling perspective, there's not really a lot for us to take advantage of here. Unless you're going to, tease the other team or anything like that, maybe. But that's kind of do it at your own risk, right? So the next one is the Colts. The Colts, excuse me, like I was saying earlier, and the Texans, both kind of in the same situation. They're both coming in with a rookie head coach. They're both coming in with a rookie quarterback. Together, those, like that combination of rookie head coach and rookie quarterback, basically spells a shitty season, right? If you start your season with a rookie quarterback and that's the expected starter for the full year, the average of wins for those teams is 4.5 wins. So that already is not a positive outcome, right? If you partner that with a rookie head coach, not only are you expected to get 4 wins, but you're only expected to really average about 17 points. 19 points is kind of on the higher end, and 19 points only comes because Sean McVay had an amazing rookie head coach year because he's just badass, and he really raised that average. Before he was there, it was like 16.8. So he had a great year. He raised the average for all rookie head coaches, but let's just call it 17. So we're really, truly expecting about 17 points a game from both of these teams. Now, I will tell you that D'Amico Ryans is another defensive-minded head coach. To me, and the reason I harp on that and I say it's so suboptimal is because in order to hire a defensive-minded head coach, that defensive mind needs to be like the best defense in the league to warrant going with a defensive minded head coach. You need to have a top 5 defense that truly makes an impact on the offenses you go up against. And as we just saw with the damn correlations, it doesn't. It just doesn't really make a huge difference. And so it's not really optimal to be going with a defensive minded head coach, especially because you give up so much on the offensive side. Defensive coaches have proven time and time again, not only do they want to focus their attention on the defense, they want to rein in the offense, and they want to be as conservative as possible. And their thought process, for the most part, right, not a blanket statement, is we want to be as conservative and protective of the ball and just kind of go at a slow pace, keep our defense gassed and fueled and ready to go, and score just enough to win, and that's it. The problems with that are many, right? Number one, we just discussed that defenses are not necessarily correlated to offensive output. Number two, really you are leaving yourself at such a suboptimal rate by trying to win these very tight scored games. Like we just said, one score games eventually come back to bite you in the ass. Lastly, not putting up points is a problem because at some point your defense is not going to be able to hold teams to 17 points. You're going to go up against a team like the Chiefs who's going to put up, 30 points regardless of what you do. And if your offense is not made to even remotely keep up with them, you just don't really have a shot to begin with. You're dead walking, right? So that's why I don't like that kind of head coach. Lastly, though, if for you to win, everything has to go right. If you're playing defensively, you can't take a bad flag, you can't take bad penalties, you can't lose a player, you can't have injuries, you can't have a bad fumble, you can't have a turnover on in the end zone or in the red zone. There's not enough margin for error in that style of play, and so that's why I don't like it, or one of the reasons I don't like it. So, like I said, for these two teams, we're expecting, I'm going to say 19 points for the Colts, 17 points for the Texans per game, and those point averages are probably not going to come out, first week of the season. Those are probably not going to be until midway, maybe even the last portion of the season, where we start to see them averaging these 17, 19, 20 points a game. So for that reason, I'm really looking to fade those teams early and often. Those two specifically, but again, we have two more teams with the Colts and Texans where pretty much everyone knows, right? Like, it's not a secret. You got rookie head coaches, you got rookie quarterbacks, you have a lot of young players on the team, you don't really have an identity, you don't have a lot of big splashy weapons. You're not going to get a lot of respect from the books, which again leaves us in a spot where we're really not getting a lot of value out of those teams. So you still gotta sort of pick your spots. I do think in situations where you have these really, really low end teams going up against really good teams, like week 1 where you have the Ravens playing the Texans, take the Ravens. Like I said, they're just not giving enough points. I can almost guarantee you if the Ravens played the Texans week 12, that line would be something like Ravens minus 14, Ravens minus 17, right? Something ridiculous, and right now it's 9.5. So that's why I took them for week 1. Raiders, out of all of these 5 teams, I think the Raiders are probably the team to fade the most. They also have rest disadvantage spots going on the back end of the season, right? Like weeks 13 through 18, where they're losing rest. They don't get as many days off as their opponents. They're probably going to be more injured. Secondly, the coaching becomes more and more predictable every single week because there's only so many things he's willing to do, and he's putting them on tape every single week. And as the offensive weapons become more and more predictable, and you know who's going to be back there and what they're going to do and what their schemes look like, they're just going to lose more and more and more. So again, the Raiders, my number 1 top fade team that I think is going to provide us with the most value. They have the hardest schedule of these 5 teams. They have the most rest disadvantage of the teams. And they probably have the most questions to be answered on offense of all these teams. So that's the Fade 5. And now that we've gone over the garbage in the league, let's look over some of the scores that we can expect. And I'm sorry, I know this video is pretty damn long, so like I said, I hope you got something to eat or drink or whatever as we're going through this. But the points that we went over from last year, so I just went back, and I do this every year, guys. I probably have about, like I said, 4 to 5 years worth of data at this point, on weeks worth of scoring and averages and all that kind of stuff. Keep mentioning week 4 as that week that we see the spike in points, right? So week 1, 2, 3, you see these teams averaging like 42, 43, 40, and that's all 16 games from each individual week. And even if you go back in years prior to that, 2020 was a huge scoring outpour just because referees weren't blowing the whistle because it was COVID year, and they were like, oh, teams didn't have enough prep time, right? So these scores are really, really high. But the year prior to that, 2019, we saw 48, 38, 46. Nothing really too crazy there. Obviously, week 2 is a little low in 2019. 2021, I unfortunately don't have it on the screen, but it is relatively similar. It's about between these two. Again, really like between the 40 to 43 mark, a couple of outliers where you have like 45 or so, 46. Week 4, though, in 2022, is at 49 points as the average. In 2020, you saw about a 52 to 53 point average. In 2021, we saw 47.19. In 2019, again, pre-COVID, we didn't have the offenses in place we do now, so that was the down year. But again, that was 1 in 4 years, and even at that was back when, again, offenses run just a little bit differently. So for the last 3 years consecutively, you have had week 4 be the scoring peak or like spike for the NFL season. And a couple of reasons why I think that happens. Number one, offensive coordinators are finally opening up that playbook, right? It's like the players are rounding into their mid-season form. They have a good grasp on the concepts they're running and the playbook and all that kind of stuff. Also, you have rookies that are starting to acclimate to NFL speed. The rookies that are finally, it's not preseason anymore. It's not minicamp anymore. It's full speed. They've gotten 2-3 games under their belt. They kind of know more or less what to look like, what to look at, and how the game's gonna be going, and all that kind of stuff. What their role is gonna be, and then lastly, it ends up being a really short-lived spike because guess what happens, right? The defenses see what's going on, where the offense is coming from, what they need to do, and they adjust for the following week. And the following week, we always see point production go back down. So in week 5 last year, it dropped back down to 42, dropped back down to 51 in 2020. It dropped back down to 46, which has been about average for 2019, which again, kind of an outlier, but it did drop back down to about 44 for 2021 as well. So we just consistently see that. So in week 4 this year, I just want you guys to keep that in mind, because that point production is going to be a 1 week thing. And keep in mind that the totals for that week are probably not going to be too crazily elevated from the prior 3 weeks. And you may want to look to play more overs. And we'll kind of pick and choose. Obviously, you're not going to just bet overs blindly. But when I evaluated these games, while overall scoring was high, there also were very high outliers in this game where, the totals were like over 70. And last year, there was one game that was at 72, another game that was at 93. And if you're looking at the screen, I'm going to just kind of hover over them real quick. The year prior to this, there was a game that was at like 71, and then another game that was at like 66. And the year prior to that, there was another one that was at like 67, and another one that was at like 77. So it just, while it may only be 2 or 3 outliers, when we see high overs or high totals for week 4, which usually, like I was saying, 51 is about as high as most books are really going to go, maybe 54 if it's like Chargers, Chiefs, or whatever, just know that you can play the over on that and still feel pretty comfortable, because at least 2 to 3 games that week are going to go sailing over 50 easily, right? At least that's the expectation. And of the like 39% or whatever of games in the season that are going to go over 6 to 7 touchdowns, I would say about 10% of them are going to come in this week. So you're going to see a pretty big production. Also, though, let's look at week 17 real quick, because week 17 is going to be another outlier, but for a little bit of a different reason. It is the average point differential, which is like your margin of victory, right? So most weeks, the average point differential, like how much does one team win by, is about 7 to 11 points. And you can kind of see that just real quickly looking through the entire season. Maybe 11, 6, 10, 10, 8, 10, 7, 8, 11, 11, blah, blah, blah. So they're all pretty much the same. Even going back to other years, right? See, like 11, 11, 9, 9, 12, 8, 12, 10. There's a 14 here. Now, those for the most part are like your regular averages. In week 17, though, and mind you, obviously there weren't always 17 weeks weren't always 18 weeks in the season. Now, though, week 17 is the outlier because a few reasons. One, the math says so, right? The math says the average point differential is roughly about 14 points, which is a full standard deviation, which was, again, 3 points above what it usually is. So we have roughly 2 touchdowns, or the 11 points plus the field goal, that we usually have to differentiate this. The reason it's so big for week 17, and really the reason I think that we see this happen in week 17, is that you have a lot of teams that are still fighting for their playoff lives, and if they take the blinders off, right, they take the inhibitor off of the offense, and the offensive coordinator says, look, we're going to put up as many points as we can, and we're going to try to win this damn game, and just, screw it, let's do what we can, they're going to put up more points. Secondly, if the coach realizes that the team is desperate, they need to win, again, screw it, let's fucking put up as many points as we can, and we're going to see what happens, right? So you see these big point outputs, but also the defense is coming to play as well. They know they need the win, they get desperate as well. So you see kind of a more lopsided team. Also, this could be the second rematch, right, or the rematch game from prior divisional games in the season, and now everything's off. Like there is no more like, well, we gotta save something for next time, can't show everything, this shit's out the window. Put up as many points as they can, get as big of a win as they can. Lastly, there are some teams that already have the playoffs locked. They're not gonna make any difference, whether they win, lose, whatever. But in week 18, most of their starters are sitting. So what they typically come out and do is they're going to have their starters come out. They're going to try and tune up as much as they can, play as great as they can, as long as they can, because they know this is probably going to be the last time they're on the field until the playoffs start, especially if they have that for that round 1 bye. So you see these teams come out and not just want to win, but want to dominate in this game, leave no questions asked, and get the hell out of there with the win. So we see these same scenario or talking points that happened in week 16 back in 2020 and back in 2019, back when the 18-week season was not really in place or wasn't like the norm at the time. So you see the bigger point differential discrepancies going back in that week before, what they call the penultimate week, right? Like the week before the last week of the season. So that's, again, something to look out for. Something that we can look to kind of take advantage of, have an advantage play once we get there. So before I leave this page on the point differentials, I do want to touch on one other thing that I've just found kind of interesting and something that we can take advantage of. Last year, preseason, weeks 1 and 2, week 3 doesn't fit the mold. Week 1 and 2 went 22-8-1 to the unders on the first 2 weeks. That's 70% to the unders in 2022. In 2021, we had 62% of the games stay under the total. So a couple of things on that. One, seems like the lines are just kind of coming out a little high when they do come out for preseason. Or two, the people that are betting on preseason are so damn hyped about preseason, they're going to bet the overs and drive the line up, and that's just, good. We'll take the advantage play there. But the first 2 weeks of the preseason, we should be looking to take the unders, especially when we can see, that we have 2 coaches that are just not interested in the preseason. Guys like Sean McVay, guys like Sean Payton, they just don't give a shit. They're not trying to win. They don't see the value in preseason. They've shown that to us with their actions. Let's do it. Let's take the unders, right? Let's just we know what they're going to do. We know what they want to do. And these guys, especially guys who are like seasoned head coaches, the rookie head coach is a little bit harder because you don't know where they're from. Maybe they're trying to show off from their family or whatever. It's their first game. They want to get a win. They want their players to get a win. Try to stay away from the rookie head coaches. That's a little bit tougher. Obviously, stay away from guys who really want to win, right? Like John Harbaugh, like the Jets. Those guys want to really come out and get the win. But everything else, we're going to try to look at the unders on that and just, again, kind of keep that in mind because it's a really big stat. Like I said, 60% is really good. So the fact that we were able to go 70% last year is huge. And also the fact that it wasn't like a one-time outlier makes it something we really want to look into. So lastly, I'm going to wrap this up with some correlations. And I apologize. I think I mentioned it, but I didn't show you guys yet. So sorry about that, but let's get into it. So the correlations, well, if you've seen the videos before, you kind of know, like I said, this is what I talk about. This is what I've been looking at all summer long. Margin of victory and QBR are the two biggest independent variables when you're assessing a team and their win correlations, right? What does that mean, win correlation? Win correlation is how correlated are these numbers to actually getting a win, right? So like in MOV, which means margin of victory, and wins means the bigger your margin of victory, like your average margin of victory, is a 72% correlation to how many wins you're going to have, meaning that you're going to win more frequently than not if you have a big margin of victory. Now, obviously, that's not really applicable for week one because we don't have any like margin of victory data. But as we get later in the season and we see two good teams playing or two good records playing, you see one team that's 10-0 or 10-3, and their margin of victory is 14 points, and you see another team that's 11-2, but their margin of victory is only 3 points. Well, we know the team with the bigger margin of victory on paper and correlation-wise should be the better team, right? On top of that, you have QBR. QBR is another one, pretty self-explanatory. If you have a good quarterback with a good quarterback rating, you should be winning more games. QBR is a huge stat. There's a lot that goes into it, but it is very valuable. And if you're just first time looking in any sort of NFL betting, probably one of the easiest stats to look up, first things you should look at, QBR. And again, this is something you're not going to have week one necessarily, or not really have quote unquote reliable week one. But as you get into, I would say week 4 and beyond, you can start looking at QBR, DVOA, and all that kind of stuff. First or one score game correlation, like we said earlier, it is a negative correlation, negative 18%. Just like strength of schedule is a negative correlation. Strength of schedule is negative 45%. So what does that mean? Again, same thing. If you have a harder schedule, you're going to lose more games. Basically, you have like a negative return on that strength of schedule. Same thing with correlation. You should expect a negative return. So the more you try to win by these like real tight one-score games, the more often you're going to lose because it's just the nature of the beast, right? Like you're flipping a coin, and a lot of times you're not just flipping one coin. You're flipping 3, 4, 5 coins and hoping they all come up heads to get the win. So that's what we've talked about before. The one I want to talk about today is actually going to be, let's say, similar. And that is the correlation from offense to defense DVOA, right? So points per game, normal distribution. 21 points per game is roughly the average for any one team, with, again, a standard deviation of 3. That's kind of what I said earlier, but didn't tell you or show you guys what I was talking about. So when we look at offenses, not a big surprise, but the good offenses are above average offenses, which per like math, right, would be dictated as teams that are scoring above 25 points. Bad offenses are teams that average 18 points or less. Good offenses are only affected or correlated by 0.06. So a perfect correlation is 1.0, right? No correlation at all is a 0. 0.06 is very, very low on the correlation, meaning it's almost like negligible. So the Chiefs were an above average offense. Basically what this means is it didn't matter what defense you put them in front of, they were going to have a good game. They had the possibility of having a good game. So very, very little to no correlation between great offenses and the defenses they play. Like I said, big reason why you don't really want to go with the defensive head coach. Secondly, though, average offense was more impacted by the defense. 0.334 is the correlation from an average offense, which I just chose the Ravens at random, but they were considered an average offense last year. That's how much they were correlated to the defense they played. Now, what does that mean exactly? That means about 11% of their offense was dictated by the defense that they were going to play. So, if they're averaging, let's say, 21 points per game, a little bit less than a field goal, let's say like 2 extra points, were really going to be dictated by the defense they played against. So it's an impact. It's not huge, but it is an impact. Something you need to be aware of. And that's, again, you're looking at averages here, so like an average offense. If you're playing against a really, really good defense, it may show up a little bit more. If you're playing against a weak defense, again, it's going to help you a little bit, but it's not, you should not be this huge, outstanding, point output just because of a 1 week, like, oh, we played a really bad defense or really good defense. But on that same note, below average defenses or offenses are very much impacted by the defenses they play, with the correlation of 0.453. Now, when we kind of make that into like variance, right? 20% of their offensive output is dictated by the defense they play. So, like I said earlier, these below average offenses are actually putting up 18 points or less, meaning that roughly like a field goal is going to be, actually a little bit more than a field goal, is going to be dictated by the defense they play. And that may not sound like a lot, but key numbers, if you know, 3 and 7, right? That's a big thing to have a field goal dictated by what defense you're playing. Because if you're playing a good defense, it may be a little bit more than a field goal. If you're playing a bad defense, maybe you score that extra field goal and you get that extra win or not. But just a good nugget to go off of, because it's not just for betting. This is information you can use for like fantasy lineups, right? So a lot of times you're setting a fantasy lineup, whether it's DraftKings, your redraft league, whatever, and you're looking at those little like red or green numbers next to your player because you want him to play against a weak defense, or you want him to play against, the number 32 passing defense or whatever the hell it is. This correlation that I'm sharing with you right now is going to take a lot of that guesswork out. Because if your defense, or if your running back or receiver is going up against a good defense, who gives a shit about the defense? Look at their offense first, is what this is telling us. If they are on an offense that's putting up good points, if you have Patrick Mahomes, if you have, hopefully Lamar Jackson this year, which is expected to be like an above average offense, if these guys are putting up 28 points per game on average, you're not taking them out. Don't take them out because they're playing a good defense. Doesn't matter. But if you are playing a team, or if you are, a team like the Saints, a team like the Raiders, a team that is below average most likely, or average if they get that good, that team and those players are going to be much more impacted. And so that's what you may want to look at when it comes to like fantasy lineups as well as betting. All right. So anyways, that's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of damn information. It's been like an hour, guys. So I'm going to head the hell out. If this video was helpful, insightful, or even just boring as shit, like, hit the damn like button, please. It's fucking took an hour of my time at least, probably more. Also, though, if you are looking for a sports book and you're trying to get down some action, especially if you're looking to get a good bonus right now, because everyone's giving bonuses, but they're all asking for like 15, 20 time rollovers, please look at my bookie. I have become affiliated with them as well. Excuse me, I am affiliated with Bovada right now too, but some of the lines are just a little funky with Bovada, and they don't come out as quickly as they do with my bookie, and they are just the Bovada lines are a little bit more square, and they will try to kind of get you on those. So the MyBookie app, better as far as how quickly they put out the numbers, what the numbers are, as well as the rollover, because they're going to have 100% bonus right now with only a 6 times rollover. That's the absolute lowest in the entire industry, and I've checked, I've looked, I've put money down already. That's the absolute lowest. So if you're looking for the good bonus, if you want good lines, if you want lines that are going to come out fast, and if you want lines that we're going to be able to jump on Sunday night after the games have finished week 1, please get MyBookie. Click on the link below. It's going to help support the channel. You're going to get that sweet, sweet bonus, and you're going to get those bankrolls up now, because the upcoming bets are going to be coming, and we need to have the money in there. In the great words of somebody else, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Later.